What if the greatest prison in your life has no walls? Not your job, not your past, not the people who hurt you. Your mind. Every day, thousands of thoughts pass through your head. Most of them aren't chosen. They arrive automatically. A delayed text changes your mood. One criticism echoes in your head for hours. A single setback convinces you that everything is going wrong. And without realizing it, your emotions begin making decisions for you. Here's the disturbing part. Most people never notice it's happening. They spend years believing their fears are facts. Their insecurities are identity. Their habits are destiny. They call it just the way I am. But what if the person you think you are is nothing more than a collection of conditioned reactions? What if your anxiety isn't a permanent trait? What if your anger isn't strength? What if your need for approval is not human nature, but a chain you've worn for so long that you've forgotten it's there? More than 2,000 years ago, a philosophy emerged that challenged a dangerous idea, the belief that life controls us. Its followers faced poverty, betrayal, exile, public humiliation, even death. Yet many of them possessed something most people today desperately search for and rarely find: inner freedom. Not because their lives were easy, because they mastered something far more important than circumstances. They mastered themselves. And once you understand what they understood, you'll begin to see your struggles differently. The stress that consumes you, the opinions that control you, the setbacks that break your momentum, the fears that quietly shape your decisions. None of them hold as much power as you've been taught to believe. In this video, you'll discover 5 Stoic disciplines designed to build a mind that remains steady when everything around it becomes chaotic. Not motivational tricks, not temporary confidence. Disciplines. Timeless principles that can transform the way you respond to failure, rejection, uncertainty, and loss. But before we begin, there's something you need to do. Take an honest look at your life. How much of your peace depends on other people? How much of your confidence depends on success? How much of your happiness disappears the moment life refuses to go your way? Because the truth is simple. The moment you see the chains, you stop being controlled by them. And today you're about to see them clearly. Let's begin. Discipline 1. The discipline of emotional detachment. There is a moment that happens to almost everyone, almost every day, and it passes so quickly that most people never even notice it happening. Someone says something, a small thing, maybe dismissive, maybe careless, maybe not even meant as an insult at all, and in less than a second, your entire internal state shifts. Your chest tightens, your thoughts race. You start replaying the moment, rehearsing what you should have said, building a case in your mind for why you were wronged. By the time you notice what's happening, you've already lost an hour, sometimes a day. Sometimes the memory resurfaces years later, still carrying the same sting. This is what it means to be emotionally entangled. Your inner state is not yours. It belongs to whoever last spoke to you, whatever last happened to you, whatever thought last crossed your mind. You are, in a very real sense, being operated by the world around you, like a puppet whose strings are pulled by strangers who don't even know they're holding them. The Stoics had a word for the alternative. They didn't call it not caring. They called it apatheia, often mistranslated as apathy, but meaning something closer to freedom from being controlled by passion. Not the absence of feeling, but the absence of being enslaved by feeling. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the known world, a man who could have anyone executed with a single word, wrote constantly to himself about this exact struggle, not because he was naturally calm, but because he wasn't. He wrote those journal entries, the ones we now call meditations, as a kind of nightly training, reminding himself again and again that the things which disturbed him were not the events themselves, but his judgments about them. Here is the deeper truth most people never realize. Emotional reactions are not responses to reality. They are responses to a story your mind tells about reality, faster than you can consciously notice. Someone cuts you off in traffic. The event is simple. A car changed lanes, but your mind instantly adds a story. That person is selfish. That person disrespected me. That person doesn't care if they hurt someone. And now you're not reacting to a lane change. You're reacting to an entire narrative your mind invented in a fraction of a second. This is where most people fail. They think the goal is to control their emotions directly, to force themselves to calm down after the storm has already started. But by then, it's too late. The discipline of emotional detachment isn't about suppressing the storm. It's about noticing the story before it becomes a storm. Think about how this plays out in modern life. Someone leaves a cruel comment on something you posted. Within seconds, your mind has already decided what that comment means about you, about them, about your worth. You feel exposed, humiliated, angry. You might spend the next hour composing a response, deleting it, rewriting it, imagining their reaction. All of this over a string of text from a person you will likely never meet, whose life you know nothing about, whose opinion has no bearing on your actual existence. Or think about a relationship where someone you love withdraws, becomes distant, doesn't respond the way they used to. Your mind builds a story. I'm not enough. I did something wrong. I'm going to be abandoned again. And suddenly, you're not just experiencing their distance, you're experiencing every past abandonment, every old wound, all activated by one person's bad mood on one ordinary Tuesday. Here is the paradox the Stoics understood, and it is genuinely strange when you sit with it. The people and events that disturb you the most are usually the ones that have the least actual power over your life. A stranger's comment cannot take your job, your health, your family, or your future. And yet it can ruin your entire evening if you let it. Meanwhile, the things that genuinely shape your life, your habits, your character, your daily choices, often pass by completely unnoticed because they don't trigger an emotional reaction at all. Emotional detachment, properly understood, is not coldness. It is precision. It is the ability to feel the appropriate amount, for the appropriate amount of time, about the things that actually matter, and to let everything else pass through you like wind through an open window. Not blocked, not fought, just passing through without leaving the room rearranged. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius about a kind of person he had observed, someone who had trained himself to receive insults the way a tall cliff receives waves. The waves crash, they make noise, they throw up spray, and then they're gone, and the cliff stands exactly as it did before. Not because the cliff doesn't feel the waves, but because the cliff's existence isn't determined by them. This is the deeper philosophical question underneath all of this. What is the difference between you and the things that happen to you? Most people cannot answer this question because they have never separated the two. Their sense of self is built from an accumulation of reactions, opinions, slights, victories, and defeats, so thoroughly mixed together that they cannot tell where the event ends and themselves begins. But there is a self underneath all of that. A self that exists before the comment, before the rejection, before the bad news. A self that was there yesterday and will be there tomorrow, regardless of what anyone says or does. The discipline of emotional detachment is the practice of returning to that self again and again, every time the world tries to pull you away from it. Here is a practical exercise, one used in various forms by Stoic practitioners for centuries. The next time you feel a strong emotional reaction rising, before you act on it, before you respond, Before you even fully form the thought, pause and ask yourself one question. Is this happening to me, or is this just happening? A car changed lanes near you. That happened. That driver disrespected me. Is something your mind added. Someone didn't text back. That happened. They don't care about me is something your mind added. Try, just for a moment, to see the bare event, stripped of the story. You will often find that the bare event is almost laughably small. It's the story that was unbearable. Do this enough times, and something remarkable begins to happen. The gap between event and reaction begins to widen. What used to be instantaneous, comment, then rage, becomes comment, pause, choice. And in that pause, you discover something most people never discover in their entire lives. You discover that you have a choice at all. Write this down, because it is the foundation everything else is built on. You are not required to suffer every time the world gives you an opportunity to. Suffering is not mandatory. It is, more often than you'd like to admit, optional. And the moment you understand this, truly understand it, not as an idea but as a lived experience, you begin to become someone the world can no longer casually wound. Discipline 2. The discipline of controlling perception. There's an old idea, often repeated, sometimes so often that it loses its power. It's not what happens to you, it's how you see it. Most people nod at this, agree with it, and then go right back to being destroyed by how things look to them. Because agreeing with an idea and living by it are two completely different things. So let's go deeper than the cliché. Let's actually understand what perception is and why controlling it might be the single most powerful skill a human being can develop. Your brain does not experience reality directly. This isn't philosophy, it's basic neuroscience. Your eyes receive light, your ears receive vibrations, your skin receives pressure, and your brain assembles all of this raw data into a model, a kind of internal simulation that it then presents to you as the world. You don't see the world, you see your brain's best guess about the world, updated in real time, based on everything you've experienced before. This means two people can be standing in the exact same room, witnessing the exact same event, and walk away having experienced two entirely different realities. Not because the event was different, but because their models, their perceptions, were different. Epictetus, a man who began his life as a slave, who had his leg permanently damaged by a master's cruelty, built an entire philosophy around this single insight. He taught that events themselves are neutral. Wealth is neutral. Poverty is neutral. Even death, he argued, is neutral. What gives these things their emotional charge is the judgment we layer on top of them. This sounds abstract until you apply it to your own life. Consider failure. To one person, failing at something is proof that they're not good enough, evidence to be filed away and remembered forever. To another person, exposed to the exact same failure, it's simply information. This approach didn't work. Try another. Same event. Completely different internal experience. The difference isn't the failure. The difference is the lens. Here's what most people never realize. The lens itself was installed. You didn't choose it consciously. It was built piece by piece from childhood experiences, from what your parents said when you made mistakes, from how your early failures were treated, from 1,000 small moments you don't even remember, all of which taught your brain, this is what failure means. And once that lens is installed, it operates automatically, instantly, invisibly, coloring everything you see before you're even aware you're seeing it. This is where the discipline of controlling perception becomes genuinely radical. because it's not asking you to think positively. Positive thinking is just installing a new automatic lens, a sunnier one, but still automatic, still invisible, still capable of distorting reality in the other direction. What the Stoics are asking for is something much harder and much more valuable: the ability to notice the lens itself, to catch it in the act, to see reality and separately see the story you're telling about reality as two distinct things rather than one fused experience. Let's bring this into a modern context. Imagine you didn't get a promotion you worked hard for. The bare event, someone else was selected for a role. Now watch what perception does with that. I'm not valued here. I'll never get ahead. Maybe I'm just not good enough. Everyone else sees something in me that I can't see, and it's bad. Notice that none of these statements are facts. They are interpretations generated instantly and then experienced as if they were facts, with all the emotional weight of facts. Now imagine catching that process in real time. The promotion went to someone else. That's the event. Everything after that is a story your mind is offering you, one of many possible stories. You could just as easily tell a different one. This wasn't the right fit, and something better is being prepared for me. Or, I have information now about what this company values, and I can decide if that matches what I want. None of these stories are more true than the others in some objective sense, but they are not equally useful. And here is the deeper truth. You get to choose which story to entertain, because none of them are reality. They're all just perception. This is where Stoicism connects to something much older and much deeper than self-help, the question of freedom itself. What does it actually mean to be free? Most people think freedom means having no constraints, being able to do whatever they want. But the Stoics argued for something far more radical, that the only freedom that truly matters is freedom of the mind, because everything else, your circumstances, other people's actions, the events of the world, was never under your control to begin with. Marcus Aurelius wrote that external things cannot touch the soul, not even slightly. They have no access to it and cannot move or direct it. The soul alone moves and directs itself. Sit with that for a moment. He was an emperor, surrounded by war, plague, betrayal, and the daily burden of ruling an empire, and his conclusion was that none of it could touch the actual core of who he was, unless he allowed it to, through his judgments. This is terrifying to some people, and liberating to others, often the same people, at different points in their lives. Terrifying because it removes the excuse. You can no longer say, I feel this way because of what happened. You have to say, I feel this way because of how I'm interpreting what happened. And that's a much harder sentence to hide behind, but liberating, because it means the door out was never locked. You had the key the entire time. You just didn't know there was a door. Here is a mental exercise to begin practicing this. At the end of each day, choose one moment that disturbed you, even slightly. Write down what actually happened, in the most neutral, factual language possible, as if you were a security camera with no opinions. Then, separately, write down the story you told yourself about what happened. Compare the two. Notice the gap. Over time, this exercise trains something extraordinary: the ability to perform this separation in real time, in the moment, before the emotional reaction fully takes hold. And when you can do that, when you can see the bare event and the story as two separate things, even while they're happening, you've gained something that most people never gain in their entire lives: You've gained the ability to choose your reality, not by lying to yourself, but by seeing it more completely than ever before. Remember this: the world does not assign meaning to events. You do. And whoever controls the meaning controls the experience. Make sure that someone is you. Discipline 3. The discipline of accepting reality. There is a particular kind of suffering that almost no one talks about, because it's so woven into daily life that it feels invisible. It's not the suffering of pain itself, it's the suffering of resistance to pain, the suffering of wishing things were different than they are. Picture someone stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting. The traffic itself is uncomfortable, sure, but watch what actually happens inside that person's mind. They're not just sitting in traffic, they're fighting it. This shouldn't be happening. This is unfair. Why today, of all days? Every minute that passes, they're not just experiencing a delay, they're experiencing a battle between what is and what they believe should be. That battle is exhausting. And here's the strange part: it changes absolutely nothing about the traffic. The cars don't move faster because someone is angry about them. The only thing that changes is the internal state of the person fighting reality, and it changes for the worse. This is the discipline of acceptance, and it might be the most misunderstood Stoic teaching of all, because people hear acceptance and think it means giving up, becoming passive, no longer trying to improve your life. Nothing could be further from the truth. Acceptance in the Stoic sense is not the opposite of action. It's the foundation of effective action. The Stoics divided everything in existence into two categories: things within your control and things outside your control. Within your control, your judgments, your responses, your effort, your choices, your character. Outside your control, literally everything else. Other people's opinions, the past, the weather, the economy, other people's choices, even your own body's health. Ultimately, since illness and accident can strike anyone regardless of how carefully they live. Most human suffering, when you examine it closely, comes from confusion between these two categories. We pour enormous energy into things we cannot control, wishing they were different, fighting against them, resenting them, and very little energy into the one thing we actually can control, our own response. Epictetus put it with brutal simplicity: people are not disturbed by things, but by their stubborn insistence that things should be different than they are. Read that again. Not the things themselves, the insistence that they should be otherwise. Here's the modern example that almost everyone can recognize. Someone in your life, a parent, a partner, a friend, behaves in a way that hurts you again. Maybe they're critical, maybe they're absent, maybe they simply are who they are, and who they are includes traits that disappoint you, and you find yourself, for the 100th time, wishing they were different, wishing they would finally see you the way you want to be seen, wishing they would change. This wishing feels like hope. It feels productive, like it's keeping a door open. But notice what it's actually doing. It's keeping you tethered to a version of this person that doesn't exist, a fantasy version, while the real person, the one standing in front of you, continues being exactly who they've always been. And every time the real person fails to become the fantasy person, you experience it as a fresh wound, even though, if you're honest, you already knew deep down that this is who they are. Acceptance doesn't mean you stop wanting things to be better. It doesn't mean you tolerate mistreatment or stay in situations that genuinely harm you. That's a different conversation entirely. Acceptance means you stop fighting with reality about what is already true, right now, in this moment, so that you can respond to what's actually in front of you, rather than to the gap between what's in front of you and what you wish was there. There's a deeper layer to this, one that connects to something almost every human being avoids thinking about: the nature of control itself and ultimately mortality. The Stoics were obsessed with death, not in a morbid way, but in a clarifying way. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself constantly that he could lose everything: his position, his health, his life, at any moment without warning. This wasn't pessimism, it was a tool, because once you truly accept that everything, your possessions, your relationships, your own body, is on loan, temporary, not actually yours in any permanent sense, something shifts. You stop bracing against loss, because you stop pretending that loss was ever avoidable in the first place. This is where acceptance becomes almost spiritual. Most people live as though the current arrangement of their life, their job, their relationships, their health, their youth, is the baseline, the default, and anything that disrupts it is an aberration, an injustice, something to be resisted. But the Stoics saw it differently. They saw the current arrangement as a gift, temporarily borrowed, that was never promised to continue. From that view, every day this arrangement continues is not owed to you, it's extra. And every change, even painful change, is not a violation of some cosmic contract. It's simply reality, doing what reality has always done. When something happens that you don't like, something you wish were different, practice saying internally just 2 words: this too. Not as resignation, but as recognition. This too is part of life. This too is something that happens to people. This too will pass, as everything does. Then ask the only question that actually matters. Given that this is what's true right now, what is the best action available to me? Not what should be true. Not what do I wish were true. What is true right now, and what can I do about it? This single shift, from fighting reality to working with reality, is one of the most practically powerful tools a human mind can develop. It doesn't mean you stop trying to change things you can change. It means you stop wasting energy on the things you can't. Energy you could be spending on the things you can. The deeper truth is this: acceptance is not weakness. Resistance to reality is the weakness, because it's a fight you can never win against an opponent, reality itself, that never tires, never negotiates, and always, eventually, wins. Acceptance is simply the wisdom to stop fighting a war that was lost before it began, so you can finally turn your attention to the war that's actually winnable, the war for your own mind. Discipline 4. The discipline of being misunderstood. There's a fear that lives quietly underneath almost every social interaction, so common that most people don't even recognize it as fear. It's the fear of being misread, misjudged, seen as something you're not. You say something, and immediately part of your mind starts monitoring. Did that come across right? Did they take that the wrong way? Should I clarify? You post something online, and you find yourself anticipating every possible negative interpretation, sometimes editing your words 5, 6, 7 times, not to say what you mean more clearly, but to make it impossible for anyone to misunderstand you. Here's the deeper truth, and it's one that's genuinely hard to accept. It's already impossible. You are already being misunderstood right now by someone. Not because you did anything wrong, but because understanding another human being completely, perfectly, without any distortion, has never once happened in the history of the species. Think about what's actually required for someone to understand you. They would need access to your entire history, every formative experience, every fear, every hope, every private thought you've never spoken aloud, the exact tone you intended, The context you were in, your mood, your past, all of it, perfectly transmitted with zero loss. That has never happened. Not between you and your closest friend. Not between you and your parents. Not between any two humans who have ever lived. And yet, we act as though being misunderstood is a malfunction, a problem to be solved, rather than simply the permanent condition of being a separate consciousness inside a body, trying to communicate with other separate consciousnesses inside other bodies, using nothing but sounds and symbols that each person interprets through their own private lens. Consider Socrates. Here was a man widely regarded, even by his contemporaries, as one of the most thoughtful, careful, and ethical people in Athens. He spent his life in dialogue, questioning, clarifying, exposing his own reasoning to scrutiny more than almost anyone in history. And he was put to death by his own city on charges that, viewed from any distance, were absurd, corrupting the youth, impiety toward the gods. The man who arguably understood the nature of truth and virtue better than anyone alive was, by the very people he lived among, profoundly misunderstood, to the point of execution. If clarity, the deepest clarity a human being has ever achieved, could not protect Socrates from being fundamentally misread by his own community, what does that tell you about your odds? This isn't meant to be discouraging. It's meant to be freeing. Because here's what happens when you finally accept that being misunderstood is not a sign of failure, not evidence that you communicated poorly, not proof that something is wrong with you. You stop performing. Think about how much of daily life is performance, not deliberate, dishonest performance, but the constant, exhausting calibration of yourself based on how you imagine you're being perceived. The careful word, choices. The version of yourself you present at work versus with family versus online. All of this calibration is driven by a single underlying belief. If people understand me correctly, they'll accept me. And if I'm misunderstood, something bad will happen. But notice, the moment you trace this belief to its root, what it's really about. It's not really about being understood. It's about being accepted. Understanding is just the mechanism people believe leads to acceptance, and acceptance ultimately traces back to something even older, the fear of rejection, which for social creatures like humans was once, in an evolutionary sense, a matter of survival. To be misunderstood and rejected by the group meant, for most of human history, danger, isolation, even death. That fear is still running in your nervous system, even though for almost everyone watching this, being misunderstood by a stranger online, or even by a family member, will not result in anything close to the danger your ancestors faced. The threat response is ancient. The actual stakes are modern and usually much, much smaller. Here's where it gets philosophically interesting. If being misunderstood is permanent and unavoidable, then there are really only two options. Option 1, spend your entire life trying to control how you're perceived. An unwinnable game, since perception happens inside other people's minds, which you have zero access to and zero control over. Option 2, accept that you will be misunderstood by some people in some ways for your entire life, no matter what you do, and redirect all that energy towards something you actually can control, namely, who you actually are, regardless of who people think you are. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote about not needing others to know what's in your heart, but acting in accordance with your own nature regardless. He wasn't saying don't communicate, don't try to be clear. He was saying, don't make your inner peace contingent on a project being correctly understood by everyone, that was never achievable in the first place. Here's a modern scenario almost everyone has lived through. You make a decision, leaving a job, ending a relationship, changing your beliefs that the people around you don't understand. They project motives onto you that aren't true. Maybe they think you're selfish, or naive, or ungrateful, or running away. You feel the urge to explain, to justify, to make them see it the way you see it. And sometimes you spend years on this, explaining and re-explaining, hoping that if you just find the right words, they'll finally get it. But what if they don't have to? What if your decision can be right for you, can be made with integrity, can be the best choice available, and still be misunderstood by people who weren't inside your experience and never will be? The discipline here is learning to let your actions be correct according to your own honest judgment, and letting other people's understanding or lack of it be their business, not yours. This connects to something even deeper, the question of who you're actually performing for. If you imagine for a moment that no one was watching, no one would ever know, no reputation was at stake, would you still make the same choice? If yes, then your choice is rooted in your values. If no, then what you've been calling your decision was actually a negotiation with an audience that, as we've established, can never fully understand you anyway. The next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, to clarify, to make sure someone gets it, pause and ask, am I doing this because clarity will change the actual outcome, or because I'm uncomfortable with the discomfort of being seen incorrectly? If it's the former, communicate clearly once and let it go. If it's the latter, recognize that what you're really trying to manage isn't their understanding. It's your own anxiety about not being in control of their perception. And that anxiety can be sat with, breathed through, and released without a single word being spoken. Walking through fog, some people will see you clearly, in glimpses, in fragments. Others will only ever see a shape, a shadow, something they fill in with their own assumptions. This has always been true for every person who has ever lived, including the wisest among them. Your task is not to clear the fog for everyone. Your task is to keep walking with integrity toward whatever you've decided matters, regardless of who's watching and regardless of what they think they see. Discipline 5. The discipline of silence. In a world saturated with noise, where every opinion can be broadcast instantly, where silence in a conversation feels like an emergency that must be filled, there is something almost rebellious about a person who simply doesn't speak, who listens, observes, absorbs, and says nothing, not because they have nothing to say, but because they've made a deliberate choice not to say it. Most people experience silence as discomfort. Watch any group conversation when it pauses, even for a few seconds. Someone almost always rushes to fill it. A joke, a change of subject, anything to relieve the pressure of the quiet. And in arguments, silence feels even more unbearable. When someone insults you, doesn't responding feel like losing? Doesn't staying quiet feel like admitting they were right? This is one of the deepest illusions the untrained mind falls for, the belief that response equals power and silence equals defeat. The Stoics understood something almost opposite. They understood that speech, especially speech driven by emotion, is often a form of leakage. It's energy escaping, information being given away, control being surrendered, all while feeling, in the moment, like the opposite. Think about what happens physiologically when someone provokes you. There's a surge, a kind of pressure, an urge to respond immediately, to defend, to correct, to win. That urge feels like it's coming from strength, but notice, it's actually coming from a loss of equilibrium. Something has knocked you off balance, and the urge to speak immediately is, in a very real sense, an attempt to regain balance by externalizing the disturbance, pushing it back out into the world, onto the other person, rather than processing it internally. Every word spoken from that state carries the signature of that disturbance. It reveals exactly how much power the other person's words had over you. The faster and more intensely you respond, the more visible that power becomes to them and eventually to you. Now consider the opposite. Someone says something designed to provoke, and you simply don't react. Not coldly, not as a power move in the petty sense, but because internally the provocation didn't land the way it was intended to. There was no surge to regulate, because there was no destabilization in the first place. What does that silence communicate? Often, far more than any words could. It communicates that the attempt failed, that the foundation wasn't shaken. This is what made certain historical figures so unnervingly powerful in the face of attacks designed to break them. Their silence wasn't a strategy they performed. It was a byproduct of an internal state that simply wasn't disturbed enough to need to respond. But there's a deeper layer here, one that goes beyond conflict and confrontation. Silence, real silence, the kind cultivated deliberately, is also a form of self-knowledge. Modern life is engineered, almost perfectly, to prevent silence. The moment there's a gap, a commute, a wait in line, a few minutes before sleep, most people instinctively fill it. A phone comes out, sound, images, voices, opinions, all flowing in continuously. And here's the question almost no one asks: what is being avoided by filling every silent moment with input? The answer, for many people, is themselves. Silence is where unprocessed thoughts surface, where unresolved feelings, the ones that get buried under constant stimulation, finally have room to rise. For someone who has spent years avoiding their own internal world through noise, silence doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like exposure, like suddenly being alone in a room with someone you've been avoiding for a long time, yourself. This is why the discipline of silence is, in some ways, the discipline of self-confrontation. Seneca wrote about the importance of withdrawing into oneself, of having a place, even if just a state of mind, that one could retreat to, away from the demands and noise of the world, in order to actually examine one's own life. Not to escape from life, but to be able to return to it with clearer eyes. Here's a modern application. Think about how often disagreements escalate, not because of the original disagreement, but because of everything said afterward in the heat of the moment, things that 24 hours later both people often regret. The discipline of silence, in this context, isn't about never speaking. It's about creating a gap, even a small one, between the impulse to speak and the act of speaking, long enough for the initial emotional surge to pass, so that whatever is said afterward comes from clarity rather than reactivity. There's also a social dimension to this that's worth sitting with. In a culture where everyone is expected to have an opinion on everything instantly, where silence on a topic is sometimes interpreted as complicity or weakness or ignorance, choosing not to speak can feel almost transgressive. But consider, how many opinions do you currently hold about people, events, situations that you formed within seconds based on incomplete information, simply because you felt social pressure to have a position? The discipline of silence includes the willingness to say, even just to yourself, I don't know enough about this to have a strong opinion, and that's fine. This single willingness to not know, to withhold judgment, to simply observe without immediately categorizing, is one of the rarest and most powerful mental habits a person can develop, because it keeps your mind flexible, accurate, and undistorted by the need to defend positions you adopted too quickly. For one full day, before responding to anything that provokes an emotional reaction, Whether it's a comment, a piece of news, an argument, wait. Not forever. Just long enough to notice the urge to respond and let it pass through you without acting on it. Notice what's still true after the urge fades. Often, what remains is much smaller and much clearer than what the initial surge demanded. And in conversations, practice this. When there's a silence, a pause, resist the urge to fill it. Just for a few extra seconds, notice the discomfort. Notice that the discomfort is information about you, not about the silence itself. The deeper truth is this: the loudest reactions usually come from the places inside us that are the most unstable, and the quietest responses, not from suppression, but from genuine internal steadiness, often carry more weight, more presence, and more power than anything that could be said in the heat of the moment. Silence isn't empty. It's full of everything that didn't need to be said, because nothing inside you needed it to be. Before you leave, remember this: the world will not become easier after this video. People will still disappoint you. Life will still test you. You will still face rejection, failure, loss, and uncertainty. But that was never the goal. The goal was never to create a life without storms. The goal was to become someone who can walk through storms without breaking. Because the strongest person in the room is not the loudest, not the richest, not the most admired. It's the person whose peace cannot be purchased, manipulated, or taken away. The person who no longer needs approval to feel worthy, who no longer needs revenge to feel powerful, who no longer needs perfect circumstances to feel at peace. That is true strength. And every discipline you've learned today is a step toward that strength. So when this video ends and life tests you again, pause. Remember who is in control. Remember that your mind belongs to you. And most importantly, remember that no person, no failure, no insult, and no loss has the power to destroy your peace, unless you hand them the keys. Guard your mind, protect your peace, master yourself, and become the kind of person the world can challenge, but never conquer. The greatest victory is not over others, it is over yourself. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment below. I rule my mind, and I'll see you in the next video.